Welcome to the programme. This week on Used Bike Heaven, a doctor from Staffordshire wants a 600cc street bike. I'll be looking at this week's featured used bike. Gary will have more tips from the workshop for us and, of course, more used bike buying tips. This week's prospective buyer is Dan Broad. He's 27 years old and an orthopaedic doctor at the North Staffs Royal Hospital. He's been riding bikes for 3 years and his current steed is a Bandit GS 400 Limited. He's had it for 2 years and it's done 14,000 miles. But now he wants to upgrade to a 600cc street bike.
Well, as you've heard, we've got Dr. Dan on the show this week. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hi there.
Are you all right?
Yes, thank you.
Are you ready for this?
I am.
Good. So you are riding a Bandit 400 at the minute?
Have done for about 2 years.
Right, and why do you want to swap it in?
It's coming up to time to change. This is my first big bike.
Right.
I'm looking for something that I can use daily. I'm looking to get rid of the car.
Right.
And all these three just seem to be what I was looking for.
So do you use the bike every day for work then?
Most of the year round. Generally there's not many weather conditions I won't ride in, but I'm looking to get rid of the car. It's time. I can't really afford to run two machines.
Become a biker full time. Fantastic. So we've got the Hornet, we've got the SV650 and we've got the Fazer. Are these the kind of bikes you're looking at?
Yeah, the 600 class. I'm not a very tall person and 600's more my size. I feel more confident on it.
So you don't fancy a sport 600 then?
I don't think I could afford the insurance.
Right.
All of these are, I think, Group 11, 12 insurance, possibly cheaper, and that would mean less than £300 a year, fully comp or third-party fire and theft. Makes a difference.
Yes, big difference. So we're going to let you loose on these in a minute. Smile comes on your face. But before we do that, we're going to get Richard to tell us a few stats about each one.
I'd like to hear them.
Okay.
The first of our suggestions for Dan Broad this week is the Honda CB600F Hornet. The Hornet first arrived in the market in 1998 and was a direct response from Honda to the enormous success being enjoyed by Suzuki's Bandit, hooned around by hooligans the world over. It looks particularly good with rather beefy Fireblade wheels too. This particular one is as naked as you like, with not a fairing in sight, though it does have the benefit of an aftermarket belly pan. It's showing 17,000 miles and looking good on it. Look closely and you'll see it actually benefits from another couple of additions, crash mushrooms. Very useful if you drop it, though I don't think you're obliged to test them. Next up, Dan, our suggestion is this Suzuki SV650, offering a little more protection than the Hornet with the benefit of this half fairing. It is, of course, a V-twin, which means huge character and personality in what is still quite a small and handleable bike. This particular one is clearly an import. The clock is showing the mileage in kilometres. In actual miles, it is 4,800, not too many. Very popular bike in its class, this. It's particularly manageable, certainly not bulky even compared to your present 400, and above all else gives bags and bags of fun. And our final suggestion for you is the Yamaha FZS 600 Fazer. It may have the street bike good looks that you're after, but many people reckon this is a sports bike in disguise. If you're hankering after a little bit of extra performance, you'll find more than enough here. A few years after launch now, it still looks as sharp as you like and provides everything that's needed for the hooligan, the racer and the poser that we know is deep inside you somewhere. This particular one is showing just 8,288 miles, so there's more than enough life left in it yet.
So Dan, that was Richard telling us about the three bikes. We're going to start you off on the Fazer. Now, he mentioned the prices. Have you got a budget?
I have, yeah. I say 3.5, but for the right bike, I would pay £4,000.
Good.
I have the Bandit 4 has a Part X value of about £1,000, so there is some leeway as regards to the price.
To play with. Right, okay. Now, looks-wise, I know you've had an interest in the Fazer, haven't you?
This was one of the bikes that got me interested in motorcycling. When it came out, 1998, something like that. I have no issue with the fairing. Some people say it's ugly. I think it's fantastic. It looks very functional.
It's got a good name.
It has. Everybody seems to enjoy it, and I'm really looking forward to riding it.
Good. I'm glad about that, because there you go.
Thank you.
There are your keys. Now, you're a doctor, so I want you to be sensible on it, because you might be used to dealing with broken bones, but I'm not.
It's a wet road and it's somebody else's bike. I
Exactly.
promise you I'll be sensible, officer.
Jump on board.
Thank you.
And have a good time. While Dan's off enjoying himself on the Fazer, here's Richard with the used bike bargain of the week.
There are some compelling reasons to consider buying a 400 sports replica. They're fast, light and nimble, a hoot to ride, and of course you save a fortune on insurance. There are also some compelling reasons to consider it very carefully before you buy. For instance, I've learned a lesson today, and it's involved the sad ruination of my plums. Believe it or not, I've learned that I'm actually too small for a 400. Sounds incredible, I know, but if I were a bigger chap, my legs would put me about here on the seat towards the backstop, and my arms would mean I'd be about here, but I'm not. I'm a bit smaller, which puts me here, right on top of the tank. Quite perilous for the plums, I'm afraid. We need an aftermarket fitment, an extra, maybe a cushion or something else. All the major Japanese manufacturers make 400 sports bikes, of course. It's just that Kawasaki's ZXR has really been the only officially regularly imported one into the UK. It certainly looks the part, razor-sharp styling and all the racy bits and pieces you'd need. It's just incredible to think I've discovered it's too big for me. I mean, I can ride an R1 or a Goldwing no problem, but a 400? Too big it seems. Still, if there's one thing that little 400s do, it's provide huge grins. It's got all the usual 400 attributes, which means bags of revs to get the thing moving. And you've really got to love the sound of a screaming Jap 4, because under 8,000 RPM, there's really not a lot going on. It's all about conserving momentum. With limited power available, the last thing you want to do is scrub off speed, which means you do tend to trickle round corners at a bit of a rate. Mind you, it's well set up to handle it. There's plenty of tyre to give you loads of grip, and the suspension, if a little firm at the back, keeps both wheels firmly on the ground at all times. That suspension can get a bit wearing, and many people opt for an aftermarket modification to the bike to soften it quite a bit. The ZXR 400 is a seriously focused sports bike, as at home on the racetrack as it is on fast roads. That's both good and bad. For one thing, if you are buying second-hand, be very careful. Check out the bike you're looking at. Make sure it hasn't been used on a track and hasn't suffered some serious abuse in its life. Braking and turning are as sharp as you'd expect on a bike of this size, weight and geometry. It feels every inch the race bike all the time, and that means no compromises. In town, don't expect a lot of comfort. So that is the story of how I came by my dreadful injury, darling. My advice is, try one on for size first. And there's another piece of advice here too. Yes, you can save an awful lot of money on your insurance on a 400, but they're not that cheap to buy second-hand, and even an officially imported one like the ZXR, if something goes wrong, parts can cost a fortune. So my advice is, and it might sound boring, work it out on paper, because it might just be cheaper for you to buy and run a 600. There is another little issue here as well. Be careful, because a lot of these bikes aren't exactly loved, cared for and cherished by their owners. They're treated roughly. Look at the one that you're buying very carefully. But if you've really got to have a pocket rocket 400, and they are an absolute hoot, ZXR could be yours for between £2,500 and £3,500, depending upon condition. And do look at it very carefully, because don't forget, you can buy one new for £5,000.
So the Fazer was Dan's first love, but will it still be that way? Let's go and find out. So Dan, the Fazer, smile on your face. Do you still like this bike?
It's fantastic.
Yeah? What do you like about it?
The position, you're up, you're seeing everything. It's not hard to look around. The mirrors are usable. A bike with usable mirrors is a first for me.
Right.
Going around roundabouts, it's quite wet on the road. There's a lot of diesel about.
Do you find it quite sturdy? You know, it holds the road well, even though it is a little bit damp in patches today.
It does, yeah. Whether it's my riding style, but at no point did I feel insecure. I've been riding it half an hour. I feel like I've had it for months.
Now it's obviously a 600. You're used to 400. What about the weight?
Similar. I mean, whether I have a heavy 400 or this is what 150 kilograms, 160 kilograms. It feels very usable.
Good.
The handlebars make it very easy to turn this into corners at low speeds. I don't feel as though it's been heavy on my wrist.
Now I'm going to take you over to the SV650 now, which is a V-twin. Have you ever ridden a V-twin before?
No, but I'm looking forward to the sound.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people either love them or hate them, basically. So it'll be interesting to see what you think. Now, I think this is the prettiest of the bikes.
I agree. The Fazer, I think, is a good looking bike, but this is just beautiful no matter which way you look at it, from the front, from the back. Just a good looking bike all round.
Right, well, if you'd like to climb on board, we'd like to know what you think to this one.
Thank you.
Have a good time.
Thank you.
Well, he's having a hard day, isn't he? So while he's off playing on the SV, we're over to Gary in the workshop.
If you're going to undertake any work on your own bike, what you will need is a good toolkit. What we need to do is have a look at my toolkit, give you an idea of things that you can buy. Now, you don't have to buy all these at once, you can buy just a few tools a week. And at the end of the time, you've got a nice toolkit. So let's go through the top. What we've got is a complete 3/8 drive socket set. You'll notice that these sockets are slightly different. These are what we call a 6-point, these are what we call a 12-point. If you've got a nut that's slightly rounded off on the corners, use the 6-point. There's a bigger flat area there to grab the nut. If not, just use the normal 12. We've also got a 1/4 socket set here, which is slightly smaller. Right, let's nip through the next one. In this drawer, we've got a complete set of combination spanners, right from 6mm all the way up to 27. They're called combination spanners because you've got the open-ended at one end and you've got a ring spanner at the other. In the next drawer, screwdrivers, lots of screwdrivers. They're all different sizes. We start off, we've got Phillips here, we've got flat screwdrivers in the centre, and we've also got posi drive at the back. In the next one, we've got ratchet pliers, crimpers, wire cutters. These are circlip pliers. We've got internal and external circlip pliers, always handy to have. Let's go down to the next drawer. In this, we've got mole grips, or vice grips, or whichever you want to call them. We've got pipe pliers, long nose pliers, normal pliers, side cutters, and we've also got an adjustable spanner. On to the next drawer. This is where all the goodies are. These are the Allen drivers, right the way from 10, right the way down to 2mm. Any Allen bolts you'll be able to undo with these. We've also got a set of Allen keys. If you don't want to use them, you can use them. Other Allen things, we've got a ratcheting screwdriver which utilises these here. You'll see these are special splined ones. These are security fittings. They've got a hole in the centre. They're very similar to the head of one of these, the square end of one of these, but they've got a hole in the centre. That will not fit in one of those, so you might need that. They're about £6. What do you think that's for? That's a tool that I've made up. There's another one exactly the same. These are just made up out of old sockets, but I'll tell you more about that next week.
So that's it for part 1. Join us in part 2 when Dan will be taking the Hornet out on his 3rd and final test, and Richard will be giving us some more advice on buying a used bike. Meanwhile, I'll just sit here in the cold and the wet. See you then. Welcome back to Used Bike Heaven, and Dr. Dan is coming back with the SV. Let's go and see what he thinks. So then, Dan, your first time on a V-twin, what did you think?
Great fun. Again, it's a great bike. Nice and predictable. At no point have I felt that I was unsteady on it.
You don't seem as excited as I thought you probably would be.
I'm a bit disappointed actually. It's criminal that a V-twin that should sound like the all-American dream just sounds so dull. I think one of the first things I'd do if I was to buy it would be to put a non-standard cam on, because the potential is there.
Yeah.
But you really only get that lovely V-twin roar when it's decelerating rather than when it's accelerating.
Right. Basically, that's your V-twin. Now, we know that you liked the SV and we know you liked the Fazer, but we know you also like to see an engine, so we wanted to put you on the Hornet. Do you want to come and have a go?
I will.
Okay. Now, we know you like naked-looking bikes, and you can't get more naked than this. You're looking a bit bemused. What do you think to it looks-wise?
It looks like it does a job. The engine, this is the CBR, isn't it? This engine just looks far too big for the bike.
Yeah. It looks quite mean, though, I think. It's got like a bruiser type of look to it, you know, because the engine's right there. No? You're not sure, are you?
It's interesting. It's certainly different to the other two. I think that it's going to be an interesting ride.
Well, I'll tell you what, then you get on it and you tell us what you think. That's the best way.
Back in a few minutes.
All right, then. It doesn't look wasn't too sure about that Hornet, but while Dan's testing his third and final test, here's Richard with this week's tip on buying a used bike.
If you're going to go buy a bike and it's done 4,000 miles, for example, you're not going to expect pitted paintwork because it shows basically that the mileage is looking untrue. You've got to look at general condition of plastics if you're buying a bike like a CBR, because plastics are very, very expensive to replace. So you don't want to be paying full money for a vehicle that's actually damaged.
Yeah, so there's no point thinking a cracked bit of fairing, or it's going to cost a fortune.
It could cost thousands. Tyres, again, look for a good clean set of tyres, because it's going to cost you £200, £220 to shore one of these up with tyres.
Yeah, which again, on a used bike, it could be quite...
Again, on a used bike, you know, you're looking at buying a package of a bike that you can go out and put petrol in and just ride off. You don't want to be having to, you know, extra expense.
Later on in this series, we're going to go on and look at some really specific little points, things that we can genuinely look for. Things like ways of checking the fork, suspension brakes, everything. Okay. Have you got anything you'd like to add in for us? Just one particular point that you would always look for?
If I was looking for a pointer, try and buy a low mileage bike with full service history and low ownership. I mean, if the bike's been passed around, if it's 12 months old and it's had 6 owners, there's something not right with it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd always aim for. If it's got a service history, you don't have to worry about the mileage. You're buying something that's been looked after.
It's peace of mind, isn't it?
Peace of mind.
So in other words, there's no excuse for not buying the right one. Make sure. It's boring, paperwork,
Paperwork
but you
is
get it right.
boring, but it's very important.
All right, Dean, well, that's the word of a professional. We'll take your word for it, mate. Good luck. I hope you don't buy the wrong bike.
No.
And in the forthcoming weeks, we'll be doing exactly that, going through some of the specific pointers to make sure you don't buy the wrong bike, just as these guys don't.
Oh, that Richard is so knowledgeable. Oh, here's Dan on the Hornet. Oh, which one's it going to be? So, Dan, the Hornet, something you've never ridden anything like that before, have you?
That was... There's no front end. there's just nothing there. The bar seat, you sit very wide. You feel like you're rowing a boat more than riding a bike, and there's just nothing. You can't pass the clocks. It doesn't even feel like it has.
Now, what about the wind? Because obviously you've no fairing there.
Yeah, you feel it. You definitely feel it. This is certainly not the best bike for touring on, I don't think.
Now that's a big issue with you, isn't it? Because you are planning on touring quite a bit, aren't you?
That's right. A friend of mine that's looking to get a motorcycle as well. We've envisaged sort of holidays and touring holidays around the Alps, around the sort of northern end of France.
Right.
My girlfriend's also looking to pillion a little more, so anything with a bit more weather protection would be very useful.
Well, we're going to need to sum it up soon, but I mean, pros and cons of all the bikes, right? Let's start with the Fazer. What did you like about the bike?
Wonderful engine, nice big usable fairing, mirrors that work, and the steering just excellent at low speeds. Really easy to tell where you're going.
The SV, pros of that, what do you like about that?
It looks great.
Yes, it does look
great. And I think with a non-standard can, it would sound great.
Yeah.
And I think that's everything. It's all about an assault on the senses, that bike. Heavy on the wrists though, and the steering could get a little bit heavy in town.
Right.
I loved it. I thought it was a great machine.
Good. The Hornet.
This
you don't obviously like
this is a lunatic's bike. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't get the wheel up accidentally one time, but I think that could be very easy. This is a CBR6 engine, which is ridiculously powerful, in a bike that's got no weight to it at all.
Okay. To me, you're looking a bit confused.
I am. I think I could buy any of these bikes and I'd be really happy. I'm sure that I'd love owning each and every one of them.
Yeah, but we need to know kind of which one. So are you telling me then you need to go off on them again?
I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that.
Another 15 minutes on these if I could.
Well, I've stood out for this long, I may as well stand out for a bit longer. But while you're out on them, here's Richard with a recap.
So will it be the Suzuki SV650 that Dan criticised for being too square? Well, the rear tyre anyway, but that can be replaced easily enough. It's still as pretty as anything, very manageable, possibly the smallest of the three. This particular one will be picked up for £3,599 with just 4,800 miles on the clock, fresh as a daisy. Or will it be the charms of the fast, funky and furious Fazer that leave Dan unable to resist? He did have criticisms about snicking it into first gear and maybe doubts about the clutch, but maybe we'll let that one slip. At £3,799 it's well within budget, and with 8,288 miles on the clock, it'll certainly last the course. Or will the horny Hornet, completely naked, leave Dan a gibbering wreck, unable to say no? He had his doubts about the missing heat shield on the exhaust, certainly feeling the temperature rise, and wasn't too sure whether he wanted to be that much of a hooligan. If he wants it, it'll cost £3,599, and it's done 17,000 miles. Could this be the one he can't resist?
So we've met up with Dan back at the bike shop, and because Dan is so indecisive about the bikes, he's absolutely soaking wet, as opposed to me, who's, well, relatively dry. But obviously, we've just heard from Richard. He did a recap. You need to put me out of my misery. Which one have you decided on?
Well, I think for sure
it's going to be your first love, the Fazer.
It is, without doubt. Every bike here I could happily own. You know,
Yeah.
if I was to own either of these two, I'd be perfectly happy. But I think this gives me, for what I need, the best all-round package. Fantastic brakes. Even in this weather, they felt absolutely rock solid.
Yeah. Well, for the amount of time it's taken you to decide, you must be absolutely in love with that bike, I'm going to show you.
Just needed an excuse to ride it again.
You must be mad. Well, now you've decided, can we go and have a brew?
Absolutely.
Go on then.
Next week on Used Bike Heaven, we're on the search for a tourer with Nigel Smith and his partner Diana Wynn, and we'll allow them to sample 3 of the very best on the market. We'll have another used bike bargain, some more workshop tips from Gary, and I'll have some more advice for those of you thinking of buying a used machine yourself.